What is this thing? This would probably throw some of y'all who consider yourself balisong aficionados through a loop. You probably didn't already know exactly what this thing is. This is a Bear Ops B200 that yesterday I went a little bit overzealous on. Actually, I did think it looks pretty cool. This is a Bear Ops B200. I don't have what it originally looked like because I altered it here. But I just took it up to a 1500 grit, rounded it off, took it up to a 1500 grit, and I think it's just really radically improved this knife. The kind of peel ply texture G10, that black G10 that was all squared off and hard all the way around, it just didn't really work very well for flipping. It just wasn't the best balisong out there, and I really have just always liked this blade shape. So I took the scales down, sanded them down, put this kind of profile on it, polished it up to a 1500 grit, and I think it worked out pretty good. I definitely like the way that it feels in hand. So I knocked all of the corners off so everything is smooth. And as well, I polished the spacer, the actual spacers there. I give them like a semi-mirror polish, and so there's a little bit of flash, so you can see it's sticking up there coming out of the end. It's just some other material that I removed. So it's, I obviously didn't do a very perfect job, but I think it just looks a lot better. It feels more comfortable to flip. I really like this knife. A lot of people hate Bear Ops, right? There's just this overwhelming hatred that they just make crappy knives. Bear Ops are just crappy knives. And I mean, honestly, that may be there may be some reasons for that. You know what I mean? Like they do break. A lot of people have had that experience of them falling apart. But I mean, for the money that you're paying for the fact that just that it's made in the United States, you are still getting what you pay for. You're not necessarily getting a lot because you can get something that's a lot more robust, that'll take much more of a beating, that just happens to be made overseas. You know what I mean? That is just the way that it is in the current, balisong industry. You can get better knives for the same money just produced overseas. A lot of the times they're ripoffs of something more expensive. You know what I mean? It's going to be like a Benchmade clone or something like that, like a 42 clone or a 62 clone, whatever it's going to be. But these are still good knives. For what you're paying for, you definitely do get, you get a nice knife. It definitely will work. It's going to cut, you know what I mean? It's going to do a lot of, it's going to work. You're going to be able to put some use into it. You can see the laser etching there on the blade. This is the Tonto version. This thing's weird because look at the size of the pivot, right? To accommodate the actual blade, right? They had to have these tang pins sitting a little bit further apart to accommodate that style of blade that they wanted to put in there. But to make that actually match up, they had to make this tang pin just massive in comparison to, this is the same model here, this stainless steel, the cast, channel constructed stainless steel. And you can see just the difference in the size of those tang pins there. That's it's an interesting design choice. It doesn't really affect anything too much. It may come into play if you're actually, a really skilled and excellent flipper that may actually affect something, but I haven't actually noticed. I've never noticed it. And this here is interesting because these old zinc handles, this is the same design of knife. I mean, it's the same handle here. Obviously, one of them's a trainer, but you can see this is where most of these zinc handles break off. They get these little fissures that form in the corners, and it'll eventually break through, and you lose your handle. I've heard and seen so many of these zinc handle Bear Ops, Bear & Sons knives do that exact same thing. This didn't do that. The actual cast steel handle here, I've got a video on Instagram. It's just a short video on Instagram. It was actually me dropping this thing on the floor and breaking it. I did do it intentionally because something was wrong. I could tell something was wrong. It just wasn't sitting right. It wasn't moving right. There was something wrong. And so I wanted to see, because I knew it was breaking. I knew something was failing. And so I just dropped it on the floor until the point where it actually did fail. And the pin sheared off. That pin that's actually connecting it in there, because this is, press pin construction. It's, press tang pin, pivot pin, I guess. And you can see how narrow it is. It's a tiny little piece of steel to fit through that hole. It's a tiny little hole. It's a very small piece of steel, and that was the actual weak point in the design. And so the handle didn't fail. And so they improved the handle design. They did make some improvements with the stainless steel over the zinc, but they still failed because they didn't make that pivot long enough. And so Bear Ops, if you happen to watch this, I doubt it, but if any, just make that bigger. You know what I mean? If you reinforce that, I honestly think this knife design here, the stainless steel cast construction, has the capability of being so much better than it is. But you come on to, like, you know, the actual Bear Ops, right? Which is Bear & Sons. It's the same company. It's just a little bit higher end. And this is an excellent knife. This knife, well, it's not excellent, obviously. I mean, it does have its flaws. It's, you know, they're not the best. They're not weighted the best, you know. But it is a good knife. You know what I mean? I don't have any serious gripes with this thing besides the blade shape. I don't really like the design or the fact that there's crazy holes in it. But the overall knife itself, the tang pins are solid and they're screwed in there so they're replaceable. If they fall out, you can stick them back in yourself, which is the same thing on the 200 here. This is a Bear Ops B200, and these are my replacement tang pins, because when this knife originally came out, that wasn't the case. They upgraded that in the later years. You know what I mean? This is more of a recent thing, because originally they were the same as this. They were kind of just pressed into the frame, and they were so small they were eating into the G10. You can still actually see, because I didn't touch the back side of these scales, and so you can still see where the original tang pin was just eating into that scale, that big dip going down in there. That's the original, you know, and so it didn't work. You know, it was a bad design. So I put these brass there. That's from a brass punch. I actually put them in there, and they're different sizes to accommodate, you know, just to make the handles actually sit the proper distance apart in the open and closed position. I did have to hammer them down to a different size, which actually makes them a different height as well. And I cut them wrong. So in the beginning, and so I mean they're not perfectly fitted, but they're fit, they're solid, they're not going to go anywhere, and it's enough to actually stop this G10 from flying around. You know what I mean? There's enough there's enough actual contact there to absorb the shock where it's not going to beat into that G10 very quickly. You know, it may happen over time, but it's not going to be something that's just really quick. So, you know, with the improvements of this, with these tang pins in this knife design here, it's good. You know, you definitely should probably you don't have to completely round them off and polish them, but, you know, give a little bit of a polish to the G10 that comes on the 200 series, because it just really, that out of the box really does have some problems. And I do have a lot of respect for their trainers, because I don't carry this thing around anymore. I've got a few other trainers that I go to over this thing, but I mean, I beat the crap out of this thing for multiple years. I really did carry this thing. You can just see, I mean, it's evident the life that this thing has had. It's just dings and dents, and it's been beat up. You know, I put this thing through its paces. I've never had any of the hardware break off. The tang pins themselves, you can see it's coming in a little bit, but it is beaten into that. You know, I mean, there is definitely some deformation on the aluminum, those aluminum handles there. You know, the tang pin is beaten into them, and I have reflattened out these tang pins over time, which is another reason for that. But, you know, they were malforming. So, I mean, again, that's not perfect. But with the upgrades, I just think that Bear Ops deserves a little bit more respect than they get. Are they excellent? No. You know what I mean? It's not like it's the greatest knife out there. But for the money, for what you pay for it, I really don't think that they deserve the reputation that they get. There's definitely better for the money. But I freaking just respect the hell out of this company. That's it. Y'all have a good one.